The search is officially over, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have hired Mike McCarthy to be their fourth head coach since 1969. Big Mike McCarthy, who last week I recorded a video that ended up getting taken down because I put it out, I would imagine, no less than 10 minutes before the announcement of Mike McCarthy's verbal agreement with the Steelers to become their head coach. But I called him the narrative hire because he's from Western Pennsylvania. He's a guy that everybody knows his name. I mean, if you look at this head coaching search, it was kind of led by two names that everybody knew. Brian Flores, because he's the DC of the Minnesota Vikings and somebody who has prior history in Pittsburgh, and Mike McCarthy, because he's been a head coach in this league in 18 seasons, won a Super Bowl, and is from Western Pennsylvania. So the Steelers elect to go with what I deemed the narrative hire. There's obviously more to it than that, but at a baseline standpoint, that's what it is. It's hiring the biggest name on your sheet, as it were, for the Steelers. The one thing I'll say about McCarthy before we get into a little bit more detail about my thoughts initially on this decision is he has an insane career path. I mean, even if you just distill it down to his time as a head coach, right? Because he coached Joe Montana in Kansas City. He coached in San Francisco. That's a pretty historic franchise. He, like I mentioned, is from Western Pennsylvania. He coached at Pitt. But the fact is, since he's become a head coach, he has probably one of the most unique and high-profile career paths of any head coach in NFL history. He was the head coach of Green Bay for 13 seasons, where he coached two Hall of Fame quarterbacks and won a Super Bowl. Then he took over another one of the NFL's biggest franchises, most historic franchises, in the Dallas Cowboys for 5 seasons from 2020 to 2024. And now he takes over as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And outside of that fun tidbit that actually I think is crazy and kind of cool, I think a lot of people are upset because it feels like it's going to be more of the same. A lot of people, myself included, were looking for a fresh start. In fact, I had prepped kind of the bones of a thumbnail for whenever this announcement was going to be made that said a new era, because that's what a lot of people wanted in the city of Pittsburgh. But you couldn't really call it a new era when you bring in Mike McCarthy. It feels like you're trying to piggyback off of the previous era. And that has been, to some extent, the way of the Steelers. When Bill Cowher left as Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, that was shortly after winning a Super Bowl. So they wanted to bring in a head coach that was going to prolong that Super Bowl window and bring in more hardware to Pittsburgh. But I don't know if this is an era worth continuing right now. I said after that loss to the Houston Texans that we have now seen time and time again what the ceiling is for this group. So it needs to be changed significantly. I don't know if it changes significantly when you bring in Mike McCarthy. There's a lot of similarities between Mike McCarthy now and what Mike Tomlin has been for the last 10 years. Mike McCarthy has one playoff win since 2017. So my question would be, not just to Mike McCarthy, but to Omar Khan and to Art Rooney, who were two of the biggest figureheads in this decision, is, are you keeping that win every year mentality? Or are you going to take a step back to try to take a step forward, like a lot of this fan base is hoping that you do? It feels like when you bring in Mike McCarthy, the answer is the former. And they're going to try to keep that win every year mentality. I just don't know if Mike McCarthy raises the bar to the level that will push this team past this ceiling that's been on top of them for almost a decade. Throughout that stretch, Mike Tomlin has continued to say, this is my baggage to carry. This is my burden to bear. Well, now it gets passed on to his successor in Mike McCarthy. It's now his burden to bear, especially as a guy from Western Pennsylvania to try to break the Steelers out of what feels like a curse of 9-8, 10-7, and a first-round playoff loss. Time will tell how McCarthy changes this team. Time will tell if this is a new era and a new direction. But instant reactions by most, and myself included, are it feels very similar. It feels like we're not heading in a new direction. And again, I might be completely wrong. This is knee-jerk initial reaction in the days following the hiring of Mike McCarthy. But it's hard to look at this hiring as anything else than trying to keep the status quo with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the one thing that is vastly different, I will say that. There is one thing that is different, and it's pretty obvious. Mike McCarthy is an offensive-minded head coach. Mike Tomlin, defense. Bill Cowher, defense. Chuck Noll, defense. Mike McCarthy has had the highest scoring offense 5 times in his 18-year career as an NFL head coach. If you look at his time in Dallas, he had 2 top 10 ranked offenses and a 11th ranked offense. And in those 3 years, he went 12-5. That's a little bit better than the 10-7 that we're used to. So that would kind of break the mold a little bit. But again, the one thing he wasn't able to do was capitalize in the postseason. 1 playoff victory. And you give credit where credit is due with Mike McCarthy. He has coached some very good quarterbacks and gotten the best out of some very good quarterbacks. Dak Prescott had his best season of his career under Mike McCarthy. But the problem is he inherits the 25th ranked offense in 2025. He inherits, at the moment, a quarterback room that is comprised of 2025 6th round quarterback Will Howard and Mason Rudolph. He also gets the 21st overall draft pick, which this year I'm not sure is going to get you very much when it comes to the quarterback room. But outside of that, he gets an improving offensive line, which is a bonus. I think this year that offensive line took a lot of steps forward. A lot remains to be seen about the left tackle position with Broderick Jones and, of course, Dylan Cook coming in and playing very well. But I think Troy Fautanu in his first actual season in the NFL did a lot of really good things. I think Mason McCormick took a step forward. I think Zach Frazier took multiple steps forward. And Isaac Seumalo is still what he is, which is a veteran that gets the job done. So he inherits a pretty young offensive line that is taking steps forward and ready to be molded into that next dominant group in Pittsburgh. It's about getting them there. He inherits a good running back room. Jaylen Warren is coming off of a really good year. Kenneth Gainwell was the Steelers MVP, and he inherits 2 pretty big offensive weapons that are ready right now, which is DK Metcalf, who's locked in, and Pat Freiermuth, who's also under contract. He has some question marks at the skill position on the outside. He has guys like Calvin Austin. What can he be? What is his ceiling under Mike McCarthy? It probably is different. And the same thing goes for a guy like Roman Wilson. You know, for some reason, under Arthur Smith's system and Mike Tomlin's reign, Roman Wilson wasn't able to find a role in the offense. Does it change under Mike McCarthy? Potentially. But there's a lot that needs to be done to get this offense to not only be ranked in the top 10, that's a lot of work that needs to be done, but just to be simply ranked in the top half of the NFL. There's some work that needs to be done here, and that's what lays in front of Mike McCarthy right now. But at the end of the day, we can't fully judge this head coaching hire, one, until we see it in action, we see what changes are instituted, but also until we see who the defensive coordinator is. That's a room of big personalities and high expectations with minimal results over the last couple of seasons. It is going to be of vast importance that you bring in a defensive coordinator that can command that room and that can start to get the best out of that room. We've seen some spectacular individual performances over the last couple of seasons. Cam Hayward springs to mind. If you go prior to the last 2 seasons, TJ Watt was a spectacular individual. We've seen great performances from Alex Highsmith. We've started to see some great performances from Nick Herbig. But the total results just aren't there in the way that you want them to be. So you need to be able to bring in a defensive coordinator to get the best out of these guys, because Terrell Austin wasn't able to do it. Mike Tomlin, who a lot of us believe was a big part, had a heavy hand in that defense, which would make sense. He wasn't able to get the best out of this collective. So the defensive coordinator hire is the next item on the list, and it is certainly one that is going to be heavily scrutinized no matter who ends up getting hired. But that's the reason for hope, in my opinion, is that what Mike McCarthy has in Pittsburgh is something he didn't really have when he entered as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And that's a talented defense on all three levels. Joey Porter's coming off of a great year. Deshaun Elliott's going to be chomping at the bit next season. Jalen Ramsey put him back in a position that he's more comfortable with, that he's played more of in the NFL. Let him be in that chaos role. Plus, we all know what the front seven can be. He inherits a talented defense. If he puts the right pieces in place in order to lead them as far as a defensive coordinator and position coaches, then he's going to be set up better on that end of the football than he had been in any of his years with the Dallas Cowboys. And if there's anybody that can make it work on offense, Mike McCarthy is one of those guys that you have to have at least a little bit of faith in to do so. Time will tell if this is the right direction for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think I agree with the vast majority. I was kind of hoping for something else, but hey, this is what they did, and it's time to back them and see what the fallout is in the coming weeks and months.